for me. This isn't something that I adopted when I came to New Hampshire because you all like to campaign this way. I've done 134 town hall meetings as governor of New Jersey during my time as governor, not when I was campaigning for governor. From the day I became governor to today, I've done 134 town hall meetings in New Jersey, and the reason that I do those is the same reason I'm doing it here in New Hampshire, is when you're governor or you're a candidate for president, you can become very isolated. You can wind up just seeing people who support you, talking to the press, doing like pre-canned events, and not really hearing what people are really feeling and thinking and believing. But when you do this, you hear it. And that makes you a better leader. Listening is the single most important element to leadership. If you're unwilling to listen, there's no way you can learn. And if you can't learn, you can't continue to evolve and be a good leader. And the best example I have of that is the current president of the United States. I will tell you that after his presidency is over, there will be just one phrase that I'll remember the most in describing this president. Often wrong, but never in doubt. And it is true, if you listen to him just in the last week, you have to say to yourself, what is he thinking? What is he thinking? And where is he leaving us as a country? He and I have had a little back and forth in the last week, and I want to address it directly with all of you. And the fact is that America is the kindest and most giving and compassionate nation the world has ever seen. We have a number of veterans here with us today, more men and women. More men and women from this country have spilled their blood, given their fortune to protect and preserve the freedoms and liberties of others than any nation the world has ever known. We do not need to be lectured by the President of the United States. We do not need to be lectured. We need to be lectured about compassion and about caring, but let me remind you of one thing. The homeland security of this nation, the security of the men and women and children of the United States is not a privilege. It is a sacred right, and it is the number one obligation of this government and the people who run it. We should never forget that, and we should never let political correctness, the elites in Washington, or the editorial pages of major newspapers dissuade us from the idea that the president's first job is to protect the safety and security of the American people and the American homeland. The president this week from overseas said, and I don't know who he was talking about when he said this, but he said, some tough guy in this race is apparently afraid of widows and orphans. And, it's the president's prerogative to say whatever it is he wants to say. But I will respond to the president. I'll tell you the widows and orphans that I know. The widows and orphans that I know personally are the widows and orphans of September 11th, because they live in my state, and they live in my neighborhood and in my parish, and they live in my home amongst the friends of my children who lost a parent 14 years ago. This is not theoretical to me, Mr. President. And while I care deeply about all that's going on around the world and believe we should do everything we can to help those who are in need and under threat, my number one priority as a leader in this country is to make sure that there is not another generation of widows and orphans created because of a terrorist attack on the American homeland. Those are the widows and orphans I'm concerned about, Mr. President, and maybe you should be more concerned about them. And if you were, we'd be leading in a different direction. See, because it's not theoretical to me. It's Bob said, I was named U.S. Attorney on September 10th, 2001. Now, an intervening event happened the next day, so my formal nomination and confirmation didn't happen until December because we were a little consumed with some other things. But on September 10th, 2001, I received a call from the White House asking me to be the United States Attorney for New Jersey. And I decided to take the next day off from work and take my kids to school in the morning. And my wife did what she did for most of that 20 years and 10 or 12 years after that. She left the house at 6 a.m. She drove to the train station. She got in a train. She got off the train, got on the PATH train, took the PATH train to the World Trade Center, walked through the World Trade Center to her office 2 blocks from the World Trade Center. And she did that morning on September 11th, just like she had for so many weeks and months and years before that. And I took our kids to school and came home, turned on the television set, and the first building was on fire. And so I called her at work and I said, what's going on? And she said, oh, it's nothing, don't worry about it. She said, a commuter plane apparently hit the building. It's not a big deal. We're working, we're not worried about it. Fire department, we can hear the fire trucks. Everybody's coming, it'll be fine. While we were talking about the morning and the day and the events of the day before and the new job I was gonna have and all the rest of that, the second plane hit the second building. And she said, they're telling us we have to evacuate to the basement, I have to go. She got off the phone, and I didn't hear from her again for another 5.5 hours. And during that time, those buildings fell. We heard all kinds of reports that turned out to be wrong about pipe bombs and other things going off in lower Manhattan. At the time, we had 3 children, 8, 5, and 1. And during those 5.5 hours, I had a lot of time to think. And we were all incredibly emotional watching what had happened. And what I was thinking about during that time when I kept calling her and couldn't find her was, what was I going to do without my best friend? What were my children going to do without their mother? And what kind of single parent was I going to be for my children? The school called on our 2 older kids and told us, because so many kids at their school had parents who worked in lower Manhattan, that they'd actually told the children about the attack, and so that we should be ready to talk to them about it when they got home. And as time took closer for me to go and pick them up at school, and I still didn't know where their mother was, I thought to myself, I don't know what I'm going to say to them if I don't get her before I get there. Well, about 10 minutes before I left, the phone rang, and it was her. Now, this is something you need to know about the future First Lady of the United States. She called me from a bar. Now, right? Now, she told me it was the only payphone she could find that was working, and love is blind, so I believe her. But all I cared about was that she was okay. And I was able to tell the kids when I went to pick them up, Mom's fine. Mom's okay, Mom will get home soon. And when I went and picked her up that night, I want you to remember what it was like. She took a boat to the Jersey Shore. And when she got off the boat, because she was from downtown Manhattan, I saw her walking up the street. They kept us 2-3 blocks away from the ferry station. And I saw what I thought was her walking down the street wrapped in a blanket. And she was soaking wet from head to toe. If you came from lower Manhattan, the fire department hosed you down from head to toe with a fire hose because they didn't want you bringing the contaminants from lower Manhattan into the state. And then a department store was good enough to donate blankets for the soaking wet people to wrap around them and take home with them. And there was my wife, soaking wet from head to toe with a blanket wrapped around her, and it was the best I'd ever seen her in her life. Best I'd ever seen her. And we went home, and one of the first phone calls we got when we got home was from a woman in town from our parish they were friends with Mary Pat and I, she and her husband. And her husband had lost his job. A few months earlier and had gone to Mary Pat, he worked in the same business, and said, can you help me find a new job? And so she did help him find a new job at a place called Eurobrokers that was headquartered in the World Trade Center. And she called Mary Pat and asked, did you see Frank? When you were getting out of there, did you see him? Was he on one of the boats? Did you see him downtown on the street? And she said she hadn't. I said, well, I'm sure he's in a hospital somewhere and he just can't get to me yet. Well, in the bottom of our hearts, we knew that Frank was not in the hospital. And of course, within the days to follow, we found out that he wasn't, and that he was one of the people killed in the World Trade Center that day. We went to his funeral. The gym at our parish is now named in his honor. And then later that evening, our son's best friend, his mom called with the news that we all knew and understood, because his dad worked at Cantor Fitzgerald. And we knew that no one got out from Cantor Fitzgerald. And so our 8-year-old son, his best friend, lost his dad that day. And in the 14 years since, and especially since Facebook has come into vogue, that young man puts on his Facebook page every year on his father's birthday the picture of his dad, and just one simple line. He said, "Dad will never forget you." I've watched that young man grow up now. He's a senior in college and struggle at times without his dad, and try to do all that we can to try to fill in the gaps for him. See, Mr. President, you can sit in the White House and go across the ocean and make sarcastic, lousy political remarks, because you don't know these people. I do. I know them, and I've lived with them now for the last 14 years. I've watched the loss and the suffering and the pain, and maybe it's escaped your memory, Mr. President, but it never escapes theirs. And that's why I do not understand why he made our intelligence community weaker this summer, with the help of some Republicans as well, I'll remind you. Because Paris was an intelligence failure, everybody. They were planning that thing for a while and over multiple countries, and no one caught them beforehand. That's an intelligence failure. I don't know why he's made our military weaker, so that our nation can feel more at risk and other nations can feel as if they could take greater liberties with us. And yet, he tells us that our borders are more secure. He tells us that our nation is more secure. He tells us that ISIS is the JV. He tells us that Al-Qaeda is on the run. He tells us on the day before the Paris attacks that ISIS is contained. All wrong. All lies. And the President of the United States continues to say he's right and we're wrong. It's like that old country song. Do you believe me or your lying eyes? That's what the president wants us to think. And I just want you to know something. I don't care whether I get the approval of the New York Times editorial board. I don't care whether the Washington think tanks think that it's appropriate. I've lived watching people lose their husbands and wives, their sons and daughters, their brothers and sisters, their mothers and their fathers. It is an ugly thing day after day after day. The loss remains. The emptiness is never filled. And once you've seen it and lived it, if you get to be President of the United States, the one thing you remember every day, and the one thing I'll remember every day, is that if we don't protect each other, no one else will. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. No country in the history of the world has been founded on those three things. We have to protect life. It is the most precious gift we get from God. And he also gives us liberty. the ability to be who we are. And you know what's happening in the world right now through this political correctness we're going through. You know, no one can say radical Islamic terrorism. You saw the Democratic debate, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, Marty O'Malley, they couldn't get the words out of their mouth. Well, let me tell you what they're trying to do here, everybody. They're trying to intimidate you out of your way of life, intimidating you out of your ability to say what you know is true. So let me say for you what I know you're feeling, which is that anybody in any religion who tries to use violent means to impose their religion on me is a radical. And that kind of radical Islamic terrorism cannot be permitted to continue. I have nothing against Islam as long as it's practiced peacefully and for the person who wants to practice it. Do not impose Islam on me in the same way I'm not imposing my Catholicism on you. Faith begins in here and should remain as part of what you practice, not what you impose upon others. And they're trying to impose that upon us. Believe me, that's what's happening here. The mullahs in Iran, the folks from ISIS, Al-Qaeda, what they want is to impose their way of life upon us. And all we want as Americans is nothing we should apologize for, which is to live our lives the way we see fit. And so don't allow these folks to intimidate you, and I can guarantee you they will not intimidate me for standing up for the American way of life, for the American people. That's what we need to be doing. See, because the last part of it's the best part. There has been no other country in the history of the world that made as one of its 3 founding tenets the pursuit of happiness. Think about that. Think about how incredibly, incredibly wonderful that is. That our founders thought that they wanted to found a nation that had as one of its tenets your ability to pursue happiness as you see it. They didn't talk about wealth or prosperity. They talked about happiness as you define it. What an extraordinary nation that is. And we need to make sure that we stand up for that and for each other before anything else. And I'll talk about lots of other things today, things we should be doing to help folks around the world, things we should be doing to make our economy better, our education system better. Anything you ask me about, we'll talk about. But none of it works unless we protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. None of it works unless we stand up for those things that our country was founded upon. And no one else will do it for us but us. We need to make sure we do that. And we need a president who never takes his eye off that ball, that wakes up every morning understanding that that's what makes us different and special. And it's not the government that makes this country great. It's the people of this country working in communion with their leaders that give us a chance for greatness, in communion with each other, because we have those 3 tenets in common. No matter what our religious faith is, no matter what our racial background is, or our ethnic background, no matter where we are socioeconomically on the scale, none of that matters when it comes to those 3 things. Those 3 things we all share in communion with each other. A respect for life, for living our lives the way we see fit in liberty, and to pursue happiness as our conscience and our heart tells us. Those are the things that are at risk right now, everybody. Those most basic things are the things that are at risk, and the things that I will defend as President of the United States every morning when I wake up. And you won't need to give me a lesson. You won't need to read the instruction manual there. We cannot afford on-the-job training, everybody. We've seen that movie. We're living it right now. You don't need somebody in the Oval Office who's never had to make a decision. Because I'll end with this one story and then go to questions. 2 nights ago, Mary Pat and I were in Arizona at a fundraiser. And we went out for dinner afterwards with the First Lady of Arizona, Angela Ducey. And she and her husband, Doug, who's the new governor of Arizona, are wonderful friends of ours. And we went out to dinner. As I was riding over in the car to dinner, I got a call from my chief counsel as governor. And it was 8:30 at night, 9:30 at night Eastern time. So I said to Mary Pat, this will take a couple minutes. You guys go in and start, and I'll join you in just a few minutes. Well, just a few minutes turned into 35 minutes, which, of course, you know, for any of you here who are or have been married, when I walked in to the restaurant, after the 35 minutes, I got that look. You know exactly which look I'm talking about. Like, I've been sitting here entertaining for 35 minutes. What have you, and usually Mary Pat will be pretty contained about that. She'll just like give me the look and then that'll be the end of it. But apparently we're all a little tired and, you know, this president thing is, you know, a little stressful. So she said, what was going on? And I said to her, don't worry about it. I handled it. It was fine. And she said, well, was it good or bad? And I looked at her and I said, now you've been married to me for 29 years. I've been governor now for 6 years. You think they call me at 9:30 at night because it's good? Right? I mean, you think they go, hey, governor's out in Arizona. It's 9:30 at night. Let's call him and give him a little good news. Lift his day a little bit. I said, of course it wasn't good. And she laughed. She said, you're right. I should have figured that out. And Angela Ducey, the governor's wife, is sitting across, and she started laughing. She said, gosh, Mary Pat, we've only been in the job 10 months, and I knew that answer. And my point in telling you that story is this. When the phone rang, I didn't have to wonder. I saw who it was. I knew it wasn't good. I saw who it was, and I know when you're the executive in charge of the government, there's only two types of decisions. Smell awful. The minute they come in the door, you can smell them. They're rancid. Someone forgot about them. They were left in a corner someplace, and all of a sudden, it started to smell so bad that they went, oh man, we forgot about that over there. All right, well, let's bring it to the boss and let's see what he wants to do. Right? The really bad, ugly decisions. The second type of decision that gets to you are the ones that no one else can make. Because if anybody else could have made it, they would have made it in the chain. When it gets to your desk and you're the governor, it's because no one else could make that decision. You need somebody behind the desk in the Oval Office who's lived that, who knows it, and who knows that that's the way the job is. We ain't hoping for it to be something else. Isn't wishing that it could be wonderful, happy, joyful, whatever word you want to use. Who's ready to make the hard decisions and has done it before. And known that when you make them, you're going to make some people happy and some people unhappy. And you got to be ready to take it. We've had a president for the last 7 years who had no idea how to make those decisions, who read poll after poll, stuck his finger up in the air, and now is in the I'm holding my breath in the corner petulant child mode where he's going to listen to anybody and just do whatever the heck he wants to do. None of that's leadership, everybody. But if you've never had to do it before, you don't know. So in this election, lots of people may want to use their vote to display their anger. I understand that. Some people may want to use their vote as a sign of protest. I understand that. Some people may want to use their vote in a way that sends some kind of what they hope to be a hopeful or inclusive message. I understand that. But everybody, the stakes are too high, the problems are too big, and the opportunities are too serious for you to do any of that. You need to vote for the person who you believe is the most tested, the most ready, and the most mature to make the hard decisions that this country needs to make to get back on the right track. And what I will tell you is that there is no one in this race who's been more tested than I've been. Nobody. By the most liberal media market in America. And remember something, everybody. About a year and a half or two ago, they're looking to kill me. And they were doing the best they could to do it. Man, 34 times more coverage than the IRS scandal. They were honed in and ready. But here's what you need to know about me. Here I am. Here I am. I'm still standing. So that's why I spent all my time in that debate the other night talking about Hillary Rodham Clinton, because that's who we have to beat. That's who we have to stop from being president. That's the ball we got to keep our eye on. So as we start questions, I want you to think to yourself, next September, who do you want standing on that stage across from Hillary Rodham Clinton to prosecute the case against her and her vision for America's future? Who's the person who you think can hold her to task? Who's the person who won't be pushed around by her? Who's the person who will convince the American people that they deserve something a hell of a lot better than Hillary Rodham Clinton? That's what you got to ask yourselves. All right. All right, so let's get to work. You raise your hands. I take your questions. We don't have to write them down at these town halls. You go to some town halls here in New Hampshire, got to write down the question, give them to the staff. The staff reads them and then decides which ones the candidate likes and give them to them. It would be wrong for me, inappropriate for me, to give the name of the candidate who does those kind of town halls. But her initials are Hillary Rodham Clinton. So, yes, sir.
As president, what would be your strategy to put an end to ISIS?
All right. First thing is what I said at the beginning. We've got to get the homeland secure, and that means a few things. The borders have to be secure, so don't worry about ISIS operatives coming across porous borders. Second, got to enhance our intelligence capability. Reverse those stupid decisions they made last summer in stopping the NSA from doing the type of surveillance they need to be doing to intercept and stop these plots before they start. The folks who did that, and they were political opportunists who didn't know what they were talking about. And I was one of the lone voices yelling in the other direction, starting back last spring. Don't do this. I've done this work. Don't do it. So we need to reverse those. Third, we've got to make sure that we get with our allies in the Middle East and let them understand that we're going to stand with them in this fight against ISIS. And here's the problem right now. The Saudis, the Egyptians, the Jordanians, the Emiratis, they believe we're playing footsie with the Iranians, right? They think that we're climbing into bed with the Iranians. And it looks like they're right. This president signs this ridiculous nuclear deal with the Iranians. He lets the Iranians come into Syria with the Russians to prop up Assad. So if you're sitting in Riyadh, you're saying to yourself, is he with the Iranians? Are they going to side with the Shias against the Sunnis? Is this what's going to happen? So we need to get that squared away because we need them. This cannot just be American troops going in there and doing this. It can't be. We need to have the people who are in the neighborhood have skin in the game first. And they need to understand that America will support them with arms, with training, with airstrikes, with intelligence. But they need to be in the game. But we've got to convince them we're going to be with them. And so I will tell you, one of the most important things in the fight against ISIS is the fight against Iran. The next president, and I will stand up and say this right at the beginning regarding Iran. One, Iran will never get a nuclear weapon on my watch. And if I have to use military action to prevent it, I will, because you cannot have it happen. Second, that not only will I not have another agreement with Iran, I won't have another meeting with Iran until they stand up and the supreme leader says that Iran recognizes the right of Israel to exist. We have to do that. Our friends need to know we're going to be with them. Third, I would say I'm for regime change in Iran. Doesn't mean I'm going to go to war to change the regime, but they need to know that the American people do not believe that a regime is legitimate, that stones women in the street, and that hangs homosexuals from cranes in the center of Tehran because of their sexual orientation, and that tries to impose their religious beliefs upon everyone. That is an illegitimate regime. And by saying that about Iran, it sends a message to everyone else in the Middle East that we won't stand for that. And we won't support people who do. So you put that coalition together with our NATO allies. And now NATO, 2 weeks ago, maybe NATO's not on board against ISIS, right? Well, we'll see. Well, the Germans, the Brits, the French. Tell you something. All politics is local. Don't ever forget it. Man, who would have ever thought we'd see the French pounding the war drums? Right? But let me tell you, it's an instructive lesson for us. French president understands a heck of a lot more than the American president does. His people were killed. And you look at the way he's acted in the last week. He means business. So we have an opportunity to put together a broad coalition now to fight ISIS, and that's what we have to do. The American president has to assemble that coalition. But how sad is this president? When last Sunday, I never thought I'd live long enough to see this. 6 days ago, I'm watching one of the Sunday morning shows. The president's deputy national security advisor is on, and they say, well, the French may invoke Article 5 of the NATO treaty, which says an attack on one is an attack on all, and that we all have to come to the aid of the French. So what do you think should happen there? What's the American position? He said, on behalf of the President of the United States, we'll wait to see what France does. I never thought I'd live long enough, man, that on an issue of international importance regarding the NATO alliance, that America, that formed NATO, would say, I'll wait to see what the French do? Guarantee you one thing. If I'm President of the United States, that's a sentence that you will never hear come out of my mouth. No disrespect to the French. So that's what we need to do. We need to put together that alliance because that alliance will show the strength of the free world against those who want to radicalize and impose their religion and their point of view on the rest of the world. And that's what we need. That's got to be the point of this. It cannot be about American strength. It's got to be about the strength of the world, and only the American president can bring the whole free world together if you're strong enough and secure enough in doing that. So that's the way we do it. Yes, sir.
I believe, to use your phrase, you can do the president thing. I really believe it. I want to know how you're going to deal with the political gridlock in Washington right now, because it's become ridiculous over the last 6 years. Nothing is getting done. Yep. And it's affecting our lives
Sure
day
it is.
to day.
Well, a couple of things. First off, this is where the experience from New Jersey helps a lot. All right? For every minute of every hour of every day I've been governor, I've had a Democratic legislature. And I would have every excuse to just say, well, people elected me, I'll try to do what I can do, and if they won't do exactly what I want, then I'm not doing anything, which is what they do in Washington. What I've said is there are certain things I won't do. You need first to show an openness of spirit with the other side, and only the president in Washington can make that happen. With all due respect, they were asking all those questions before Paul Ryan got elected speaker. Who should be the Speaker of the House? I got asked every day by the press, who do you think should be the Speaker? I said, I don't care. So why do you care? I said, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. In current Washington, D.C., with this president, it doesn't matter. God bless Paul Ryan. He's a great guy. I think he'll try to do as good a job as he possibly can, but he won't get anything done until there's a new president. And the New Jersey experience was taught to me by Governor Tom Kean. Now, Governor Kean's one of my predecessors, a two-term Republican, who had a Democratic legislature for 6 of the 8 years that he was governor. And I went to meet with him beforehand to get advice during the transition period. And he said, sure, I'd be happy to have meetings with you. And we had regular, every other week meetings during the transition. So when I went for the first meeting, I said to him, Governor, how do you want to do this? He said, well, I'll ask questions. You answer them, then I'll critique your answers. Okay. So he said, all right, sit down. I sat down. He said, first question. I said, yes, sir. He said, who's your best friend? I said, Mary Pat. And he said, not anymore. I said, really? He said, no. You are going to do everything you can to make your best friend the Senate president. Senate president is going to be your best friend. Because if he is, you got a chance to have a successful governorship. And if he isn't, you don't. Now, the Senate president in New Jersey was then and still is now my friend, Steve Sweeney. the president of the Ironworkers Local. Not a shy and retiring type, okay? A strong union Democrat. But Steve and I both worked hard at developing a friendship. I know his wife Patty and their children. He knows Mary Pat and our 4 children. Got out to more dinners and drinks and meetings and phone calls and all the rest that you can count. And doesn't mean we agree on everything. We don't. Doesn't mean we don't fight. We do. But when we get in a room together, he knows if I look him in the eye, no cameras, no reporters, no politicos, just us, and I say to him, if I do this, will you do that? He knows that if I say I'll do it, I will. And I know if he says he'll do it, he will, regardless of the polls and regardless of the politics of the moment. That's the kind of relationships a president has to develop with members of Congress. And not just members of Congress of his own party, but of the other party too. I was stunned to hear 3 months ago that it was the first time John Boehner had ever been on Air Force One. He'd been the Republican leader of the House for 6.5 years. He'd never been on Air Force One. Let me tell you something, everybody. Nancy Pelosi still the Democratic leader of the House. Now, I'm President of the United States. She can come on Air Force One whenever she wants. She can take the M&Ms too, for all I care. I don't care. Whatever's going to make her happy, because here's the thing. Every minute she spends with me, here's what she's going to realize. I'm a good person. And my word is good. Now, we may not agree on a whole lot else, but that's where you got to start. And it takes time and it takes effort. And you're not going to want to do it certain days. And the phone's going to ring and it's going to be a member of Congress and you're going to go, President of the United States, I don't want to be bothered. Answer the phone. That's what leadership is all about. And I will not make Washington, D.C. perfect. Far from it. But I'll make it a heck of a lot better than it is now because I will invest the time in developing those relationships. And the second piece is, you got to let everybody know where you stand. There can't be mysteries. They got to know what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. And you need to be honest about it. You know, I've told them in New Jersey, I'm not raising taxes. Told them right at the beginning. They've tested me more times because I've now vetoed more tax increases than any governor in American history. Now, I couldn't have done that without my Democratic legislature, right? My liberal Democratic legislature sent me all the tax increases so I could veto them. They tested me, but they know. He's just not going to do it. But there are very few things that I look at them and say, absolutely not, under no circumstances. You got to be willing to listen. And you got to be willing, because guess what? The people elected them too. As much as I might not like it, believe me, and I don't. I'd give my left arm for a week with a Republican legislature. A week. We'd never sleep. For a week, we wouldn't sleep. We'd get everything done. We could have 1 week. Okay, let's go. You know, it would be great. It's not what the people have chosen. So I got to work with what they've chosen. Can't stand in the corner and hold my breath. I got to do it. And that's what we need to do in Washington now. And it's the only way to fix this. There's no other magic bullet. You know, anybody who tells you there's some silver bullet, some magic way to do this, they're wrong. It's about personal relationships. That's it. And if you, because we don't make anything. That's why when they close down the government, it cracks me up. Well, what are you doing? It's the only thing we say. It's not like we closed the government, but the manufacturing plant's still running really well. Like, no, there's nothing. You do nothing. You're sent there to govern. If you don't govern, you're doing nothing. Go home. So we got to do what we're sent there to do. And a president, a strong president, an involved president, a president who cares about results can get that done. And that's, and the 6 years of governing the state that I lovingly call unruly has given me a lot of experience in how to deal with that, I guarantee you. Yes, sir, in the back.
Governor, I'm watching this gentleman tape you here, and I've timed your last 2 answers, and they've been great answers. They've been long. What can we, they're great answers. There's not a criticism. What can we do about the circus show debate format that they ask you, how would you solve Social Security? You got 15 seconds, go. And then you get somebody chiming in on you where you can't answer the questions. If you could answer the questions, if any one of our candidates could answer the questions, the clear contrast between us and them would be defined.
Yeah.
Can you stand up and, I mean, what can we do? I mean, there's certain sideshows that are going on in our primary that have to be exposed. Make America Great Again is great, but that's not substance.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Here's the thing. That's why Iowa and New Hampshire are so important. See, the debates are a 2-hour swath of time once every 5 or 6 weeks that a lot of people seem to focus on. But remember something. None of those debates have in any material way yet changed the race, right? So let's not obsess about them. What's going to change the race? I will tell you what's going to change the race. Iowa and New Hampshire. That's what's going to change the race. Because you all get to do this. He gets to record all these answers and go home and watch them again. God bless you. Right? Or do whatever he's going to do with them, right? So that's why I will always stand up when I'm president, when I'm head of the Republican Party in this country. I will always stand up that New Hampshire should have the first in the nation primary and Iowa should have the first in the nation caucus. And it's because you all are going to change the race when you vote. When the first real Americans actually have to go into a gymnasium or a cafeteria or a church basement or wherever you go to vote, when you go in there for the first time, that's the first time the American people are going to go, okay. And they count on you, by the way. They count on, they're not paying nearly as much attention as you are. They count on you to go, okay, Iowa, New Hampshire said these 4, 5, 6 people are real. Okay, let's go. Now let's get them running around the rest of the country, see what they can do. So I'm not obsessed over the debate stuff. As you know, I'm not a whiner or complainer about this debate stuff. The networks set the rules for the most part. They set them for their own purposes. Listen, they don't want us to have longer answers because that means shorter commercials, man. And they're getting $250,000 for 30 seconds. Hey, let's remember what the networks are in business for. They're to make money. That's what they're there for. They're not to contribute to democracy. Come on, please. Seriously. They're there to make money. God bless them. That's fine. But let's not put any more import in it than it already has. So my view on it is, put a podium and a microphone someplace. Give me whatever amount of time you're going to give me, and I'll make my case. And how about this? Remember, all these people were all like their hair on fire because I was going to be in the first debate rather than the second debate the last time. And the press was crazed over this. Governor said awful mortal wound to your campaign. I said to all of them, I'm not upset. You must be upset. You're putting on a brave face, but you must be upset. Listen, put a microphone and a podium someplace, and I guarantee you one thing, the debates are on Tuesday night, you'll be writing about me on Wednesday. No matter which one I'm in, you'll be writing about me on Wednesday. And guess what? They were, right? So I don't worry about doing somebody else's job. I worry about doing mine, right? They give me 60 seconds. But believe me, in the last debate, we got 90. That ain't easy. When they train you like a dog for 60 seconds, right? You think I'm kidding. You go through debate prep and you get yourself trained that everything's got to be in 60, right? So then the last debate prep, my team says to me, okay, now we have 90 seconds. So they ask me a question and I give a 60-second answer. And they go, there's still 30 seconds left. I'm like, damn, man. Am I going to get the next 30, right? I mean, so you get yourself in that mindset. So my point is we can adjust to whatever rules they put up. And when the field gets, because who the hell are they to make the field smaller? You know who should make the field smaller? Voters should make the field smaller. That's who should make the field smaller. Yes, ma'am, I'll give you mine.
Governor, I once worked for the federal government. I worked for the Internal Revenue Service, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of it. But having been there, I know that there are throughout government so many duplicative programs. How do you think you would approach dealing with all of that and trying to save enormous sums of money?
Well, first off, thank you for working for the IRS. And and I want to tell you why. Not only because I'm sure you did your job well and faithfully and served the public, but my grandmother worked for the IRS too. All right, and she was proud of working for the IRS also. So go pick on something else right now. I'll leave this poor lady alone. Here's how I did it. Here's how I did it in New Jersey and how I would do it as president. When I came in New Jersey, we had an $11 billion deficit on a $29 billion budget. So a 40+% deficit on the budget. It was the biggest by percentage of any state in America. And the Democrats immediately sent me a tax increase to fill the gap, even though they had raised taxes and fees in the 8 years before I became governor 115 times. And we still had an $11 billion deficit. I said to them, maybe that should indicate that the problem is not that we're not taxing enough, it's that we're spending too much. So we were in such bad shape when I got in January 19th of 2010 that by the second pay period in March, the treasurer told me we were not going to be able to meet payroll. The second wealthiest state per capita in the nation was not going to be able to meet payroll for the second pay period in March. So I did what you have to do. I went into the budget. I had 3-hour meetings 3 times a week for those 6 weeks and went through every line of the budget. And we cut 800 programs out of the New Jersey budget, 800. And let me tell you, it wasn't all like waste. There were some decent programs that we cut. And every one of them had a constituency. I'm telling you, every one of them did. Because I got the emails and the phone calls and the protests on the steps of the State House and the protests outside my house and everybody's program. They would say to me, you're right, you got to cut that spending. Just this program, though, is really precious and special, and you can't cut this one. And I'm like, you know, there are 799 other people just like you who are telling me not to cut their program. The only way to go through this and do that in the way you're talking about is not with a meat axe. We've seen that when you do it and say, well, we're going to have a 5% across the board cut, you wind up hurting things that you can't afford to hurt. We've seen that with sequester and the military. And the military has been hurt miserably, but not only by sequester itself, but by the president imposed sequester by saying you couldn't pick and choose, just had to lop off everything. You can't do that. It's the easiest way to do it, and it's the greatest political soundbite. I'm going to reduce the government by 10% across the board. Because then you don't have to say anything else after that. Well, what do you mean? Everything. It's across the board. What are you talking about? What do you mean? I wouldn't do that. What I would do is do exactly what I did in New Jersey. I'd start by telling each one of my cabinet secretaries, here's the deal. In your first year, you have to return 1 penny in waste to me for every dollar I send you. Let's start with that. In a $3 trillion budget, you're talking real money. 1 penny. And I'd say to them, if you can't give me 1 penny back for every dollar I give you, you're not going to be the cabinet secretary at the end of the first year. That will be a great motivator, I think, for them, and get them to do their job. And every agency should be charged with that requirement. 1 penny for every dollar. Seems pretty reasonable, right? But in a $3 trillion budget, you're talking about a lot of money. So let's get smart about that. And let's start with that and keep moving from there. And look at individual programs, look at the duplication as you talked about, consolidate things. We have 15% fewer employees today on the payroll in New Jersey than we had when I became governor. And we didn't lay off one person. It was all through attrition, and then when the people left, they've retired, we consolidated jobs. And people are still doing the jobs, and the government's still doing just fine, and we've got nearly 10,000 fewer employees today than we had when we started. Because if you want to cut money, that's where the money is. Money is with people. It's with people and programs, and so you got to go after both. And that's the way I do it as president, too. Same way. All the way in the back. Yep, you got it.
You've talked about entitlement reform,
Yes, ma'am.
and I know and you know that that's really Congress is in charge of entitlement reform. So how would you encourage them to make those tough decisions since the OMB doesn't deal with entitlement reform and they deal more with discretionary spending?
Well, I mean, listen, first off, all spending is in the hands of Congress, right? So let's be clear about that first. The House appropriates all money. No money can be appropriated unless the House appropriates it and the Senate concurs and it gets sent to the desk of the president and then he signs off or she signs off on it, right? So there's not a division between entitlements and other type of spending. All spending has to begin by the Constitution in the House of Representatives. So the president can have great influence over that. And the way you have influence over it is to propose a plan and send it to Capitol Hill. And I'm the only person in this race with a plan to reform entitlements. The only one. Listen, it's getting late now. Okay? I was saying this in April, and everyone's like, well, give them time. I mean, gosh, it's only April. Well, I started with that. It's now Thanksgiving, and no one has a plan. They all say, like, wonderfully either nice things or stupid things in response to it, and you'll notice in every debate I get asked about entitlements. All four, I've gotten asked about entitlements. Why? Because I'm the only one with a plan. So they say, well, Governor, your plan is this. Governor Huckabee says that. What do you say to Governor Huckabee? Is this? Mr. Trump says that. What do you say to Mr. Trump? And this is this. Governor Jindal says that. What do you say to him? And I'm fine with becoming the entitlement guy. But the reason that we're going to be able to compel the Congress to do it is for the same reason that Willie Sutton gave when they asked him why he robs banks. He said, because that's where the money is. 71% of all federal spending today is entitlements and debt service. 71 cents on every dollar we tax and borrow is spent on entitlements and debt service. And debt service is a small part of that because interest rates are near zero. Imagine what's going to happen when interest rates go up. How much we're going to have to be paying of a percentage. It's going to be absolutely unsustainable. So you've got to lead in that direction by putting yourself out there. And I've done it. It's not popular to talk about this. Hillary Clinton says there's no crisis in entitlements. Even though Harvard and Dartmouth came out with a study just a few months ago that said Social Security will be insolvent in 7 to 8 years. So there's no crisis in entitlements, yet her president, who she works for, just stole $150 billion from Social Security retirement to give to the Social Security Disability Program. By the way, did it with the complicity of a Republican Congress who agreed to it. And I told you all this in April. I said the disability program's going broke, and they're going to steal money from the retirement program to fund it. Keep your eye on it. People are like, oh, running for president, just saying whatever he thinks is going to sound good. Well, no, they did it. $150 billion worth. So you have to put yourself out there first because it's unpopular. It's unpopular to tell people that these things need to be changed, but they have to be changed because we are engaged in generational theft. We are stealing from our children and grandchildren, and we can't keep doing it. $19 trillion in debt, everybody. We can't fathom what $1 trillion is, let alone $19 trillion. It's got to stop. And it's not going to stop. We could eliminate the other 29% of what government does, which is everything else government does, from national defense to education to technology to National Institutes of Health to the Department of Commerce, every one of them, labor, whatever the heck they do over there, all these, eliminate all of it, it's only 29%. So that's why I've got a plan. I'm not going to go through it with you today because I really want you to stay awake. But go to chrischristie.com. It's there. It's been scored by the Congressional Budget Office, not by us, by CBO, and it says it will save over $1 trillion over the next 10 years. That's a good start. It'll allow us to make those programs solvent and will allow us to have some more money to spend to rebuild our national defense and to try to start developing more cures and treatments for diseases that will help to lower the costs in Medicare and Medicaid. Because right now, those 4 diseases, heart disease and diabetes, cancer and Alzheimer's, are driving the overwhelming amount of our spending on health care. We should be investing more money up front to try to find cures and treatments for those diseases so they don't crush us financially on the back end and destroy people's lives at the end of their life. So that's why I'm spending time. And Congress, this is going to be my job to bring them around. And I'm either going to succeed or I'm going to fail. But it's not going to be because I'm just timid. I'm out there. I've got my plan out there. Now let's have an argument over it. You want to argue? Let's argue. And let's find places to compromise if we can compromise. But let's get to it. Let's not ignore it any longer. Remember what Governor Huckabee said in the first debate. God love him. That he thinks, no, we shouldn't do anything. And he said his way to solve the problem was a different kind of taxation that would tax pimps and prostitutes. And that would solve the problem. Now listen, first of all, when I was picturing running for president, I have to tell you, I never thought I would be on a stage on national television with 24 million people watching and the phrase pimps and prostitutes would be used. So I got to credit Mike for that. I never saw that coming. But I've now been in the last 18 months, now almost 24 months now. The last 24 months, I've been to 49 of the 50 states. Only Alaska remains unscathed from having to have me as a visitor. And I can tell you, I've seen what's going on in these 40. There's not enough of the pimp and prostitute thing going on as far as I could tell. to deal with the problem we have in Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So we'd love to be able to do it that way. God love them, but it ain't going to happen. So we got to actually do real solutions. Yes, the lady in the back with the sweatshirt. Right there, yep.
What are your plans for revising Obamacare?
Well, first off, you might have seen this week that United Healthcare, the largest insurer in America, says they're pulling out of the Obamacare exchanges because it's so unprofitable. Gosh, who could have predicted that? And they're saying that, see, what's happening is that people are anticipating when they're going to need a medical procedure. They buy insurance, then they get the medical procedure, then they cancel the insurance, and they get their money back. And we're surprised at this? Like, come on. We knew this was going to happen. So first thing is, we got to get rid of Obamacare as a national idea. This should not have been a national program to begin with. And this is what I think should be done. This should be handled at the state level. Every state should develop, and should be required to develop, their own health care plan for the people of their state. Because let's face it, let's look at our two states, all right? New Jersey and New Hampshire, about the same size from a geographic perspective. About the same size. You got 1.3 million people. I got 8.9 million people. Now, who would ever think that a health care program that would deal with the problems of access and cost for New Hampshire would work in New Jersey? It just won't. The challenges are markedly different by the amount of our population, the density of the population, the distance that people have to travel here to find the specials, the quality health care they need is much different. In New Jersey, my God, we trip over a hospital every 4 miles. They're everywhere. That's not our access problem. Our access problem is all about cost. It's not about distance. So let's not try to pretend that you can come up with a national problem that's going to fix the problem for New Jersey, New Hampshire, and Wyoming, which has an entirely different set of problems. So let's put the governors and the legislatures in charge of this. And here's the other good news. The same way we trip over hospitals in New Jersey, you trip over state reps. Right? Okay. State reps are everywhere, right? Madam Speaker, right? 400 state reps, right? Here's the good thing for you. No matter where you go in New Hampshire, you don't like something that's going on, you're about an arm's length away from a state rep. You can grab that man or woman and say, listen, this isn't working for me, and here's why. My point to you is that that is the same in every state to different degrees. You know, your state rep, your state senator, you know them. You see them at the local deli. You see them at the dry cleaners. You see them on the soccer or the football field. You see them at church or synagogue. You can, and you see them right here at these bars and bowling alleys, right? Might be more at the bars and bowling alleys. I'm not so sure. But the fact is, you can have access to them and help to influence what happens in your state if it's not working the right way. When was the last time you kind of saddled up for a beer at the bar with a bureaucrat from Health and Human Services? You know, and be able to have any influence over them. This has got to be a state-based solution from a practical perspective. And let me tell you from a philosophical perspective why I agree with that. Not only because I'm a governor and I believe these problems are best solved at the state level, not the national level, but we do have a Constitution. And the Constitution says that those powers which are not enumerated for the federal government in this document revert to the states. Now, I've reviewed the Constitution. I don't see health care anywhere in the Constitution. And we need to follow the wisdom of the founders. They didn't just do that willy-nilly. They did it because they knew that government closer to the people was the government more accessible to the people and then more affected by the people. And so that's what I think we need to do. Go to a state-based system, require each state to come up. You can't opt out. You got to come up with a solution for the people of your state, let the people of your state then pass on whether they like it or they don't like it. Yes, sir.
Governor, thank you for being here, and also one of the only candidates that are actually listening to the people versus talking to the people. Despite your newfound friend as the Senate President, what would you do to rein in a rogue National Labor Relations Board and overturn some of these job-killing policies, such as the ambush election rule, should you become president?
Fire every Obama appointee I could find. Start with that. Listen, I want bipartisanship. We have to have it, but elections have consequences. And if I win, I'm not letting them stay. in the executive branch, okay? I'm going to bring in smart, right-thinking conservatives who understand that what's happened at the NLRB is outrageous. It is completely outrageous. And it is a rigged system. It's a rigged system that's rigged for a certain result. And it just can't continue that way. And so, yeah, now listen, Steve's my friend, but I'm not putting him on the NLRB, okay? I mean, there's no chance. And I didn't make him Senate president. The people of New Jersey elected him to be in the state Senate, and the people of his caucus and the majority voted him to be Senate president. So that's fine, and we don't agree on all those things. But I will tell you, the NLRB is out of control, and it's one of many of those things that when people lose hope about what the president has done to the country, and oh my gosh, all we need to do is change presidents. There are so many things that a president can change, as we've just seen. We've watched this guy use the executive power to change so many things in this country. So, if you can't beat him, join him, man. Let's go and let's do it. Let's go and elect a Republican president who will put people in office, who will make the decisions that empower individuals again, not empower government. And in the end, what the NLRB is doing is empowering government and government's friends, which are the labor unions. And, labor unions have every right to exist, but they don't have a right to predominate. And people have a right to work in this country, and they shouldn't have to work under all these restrictions. So, yes, ma'am, right there.
Governor, I very much appreciated your story about the morning of 9/11. I live 6 blocks, I'm from Arlington, Virginia, and live 6 blocks from the Pentagon. My daughter, I thought, was at the Pentagon bus stop, and I didn't know where she was for 2.5 hours. So I know what you're talking about. And so my question is really about my daughter and about the future of our daughters and the Supreme Court. There are probably going to be 3 seats that come up on the Supreme Court were you to be elected president. And there are many women in the country who are very concerned about Roe v. Wade being overturned if there's a Republican-appointed justice to the Supreme Court. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. Well, first off, I'm pro-life. And so I think Roe versus Wade was wrongly decided. I don't think, and here's the thing. Let's put aside for a moment the question of abortion itself. They took from the states the right for people to decide what the law should be in their state. They created, out of nowhere in the Constitution, a constitutional right to an abortion. That's nowhere in the Constitution. That is created by a set of judges who were looking for a result to get to, in my opinion, and developed a rationale to get to that result. And so let's remember first what Roe versus Wade did. It took from each and every state the ability for them to make that decision on their own. If Roe versus Wade were reversed and a state wanted to determine that they wanted to make abortion legal in their state, they could. They have the absolute right to do that. What Roe versus Wade did was say, the states don't have the right for that. If there's a state that wants to prohibit abortion because the people of the state believe that that's what should happen, you can't do that. That's a pretty high bar to get over, and I think it was wrongly decided. Now, I will tell you that I've appointed now 3 justices to the New Jersey Supreme Court, reappointed 1, but appointed 3 new ones. I don't ask them about individual matters and cases when I interview them, because I think it's inappropriate for them to answer, how would you rule on this or how would you rule on that? I more have a conversation with them and ask them about what their judicial philosophy is, what they think the appropriate role of a judge is. And if they say anything other than a judge is supposed to interpret the law as passed by the people, not make the law, then they don't get a second interview. Because that's all their job is to do. And let me tell you, whether you like Roe versus Wade or you don't, or there's other decisions you like or you don't, you do not want a judiciary with supreme power, because they're unanswerable in most states. And in the United States Supreme Court, they're completely unanswerable to the people. They get nominated for a lifetime term, and once they're confirmed, they're there for life no matter what. There are ways they can be removed, but let's be practical.
The problem with the discussion is that now there's been so much focus on Planned Parenthood and the abortions that they do, which is 3% of the work that they do, that it's trickled down to trying to prevent women from having access to contraception,
Oh, it's just
which
not true.
avoids.
That's just not
having-
true. I mean, listen, it's not true. In my state, I haven't funded Planned Parenthood for 6 years. Okay, we vetoed Planned Parenthood for funding 6 years ago. And we increased funding to federally qualified health clinics. Now, any woman can go to any federally qualified health clinic in New Jersey and get contraception. They need to go to Planned Parenthood, okay? And I love these folks who say Planned Parenthood provides mammograms. No, they don't. There's not one Planned Parenthood center in America, by the testimony of their own president. All they do is refer to other places for mammograms. In federally qualified health clinics in New Jersey, you can get a mammogram. You can get a pap smear. You can get prostate screening as a man. You can get any type of health care you need. This is a political argument. And Hillary Clinton wants to make it about women's health care. It's not about women's health care, everybody. It's about politics. And there's not one woman in New Jersey who has not gotten health care because we didn't fund Planned Parenthood $7.5 million a year for the last 6 years. We not only expanded federally qualified health clinics, we expanded Medicaid. So no matter what your economic status, you have access to health care in New Jersey, man or woman. So, Planned Parenthood is a political organization. They have a political agenda. And if you want to fund them. Open your checkbook and write a check. Send them money. That's your choice. As president, I wouldn't either encourage you or prohibit you from doing that. That's your call. But if there are people here who are paying taxes who don't agree with the agenda of Planned Parenthood, then why should I compel them for their money to be spent in that way? And so, I just want to have an honest debate about it with Mrs. Clinton. And for her to stand up and say this is about, Republicans oppose women's health. I don't oppose women's health. I don't oppose men's health. I don't oppose the health of pets. I don't oppose the health of anybody. And in fact, as governor of New Jersey, we spend a heck of a lot of money to make sure that people have access to health care for whatever their concern is. But Planned Parenthood is not the sole or even the primary or even a plurality provider of health care to women in my state or in any other state. And so let's have an honest argument. You want to argue about the political goals of Planned Parenthood and do we support it or not, then let's argue on that. But if she tries to debate me next September on women's health and Planned Parenthood, I guarantee you something. She will lose because the facts are on our side, not on hers.
Governor Christie, I think like everyone else here in this room, I agree with you that national security should be a top priority of any American president. But I don't agree that blocking Syrian refugees from entering the United States is the best way to do that, which is something that you have pledged to do. Look, Steve Jobs was the son of a Syrian migrant. Albert Einstein himself was a refugee from Nazi Germany. Wouldn't you agree that by turning our backs on Syrian refugees, we are preventing future Einsteins from entering this country?
No. Give me a second, because it's a perfectly valid question. It's a perfectly valid question and an important debate that we have to have in the country. My answer is no, and let me tell you why. Because Steve Jobs' father was not sent here during a time when ISIS and Al-Qaeda were specifically recruiting folks to send into the United States to commit murder. And your answer has to be with what the world really is, not what we wish it was. It's not Nazi Germany when Albert Einstein was fleeing Nazi suppression. And Jews were not looking to attack the United States and kill innocent Americans. They were looking to escape the oppression they were in. Now, does that mean that every Syrian refugee is trying to kill Americans? No, it's not. But here's the problem. I'd be happy to let in Syrian refugees, and I've said that before, until the FBI director said, we have no way of vetting these people. He sat before Congress, a guy I know and respect and used to work with. Jim Comey was the U.S. attorney in Manhattan when I was the U.S. attorney in New Jersey. I've known him for 14 years. He is worked for Republican presidents and now a Democratic president. He's an honest, straightforward law enforcement guy. And he sat before Congress and said, we have no way of vetting these people. Well, then, to me, it's no longer a tough call. If I cannot promise you and you and you that I am not letting in a terrorist, then I can't let them in. And let's remember something else. The president created this problem and he could fix it. We should set up a no-fly zone in Syria and a safe zone within their country where people from that country could go and promise to be safe and not be at risk for their lives. And we could do that now with our NATO allies and our Arab allies in Syria. So these folks would not have to leave their home country and go to parts unknown where they have no family, no friends, no means of making a living, and no way of educating their children. So we want to solve the problem? Let's solve the problem without creating problems in the United States. Let's set up a no-fly zone in Syria. Let's create a safe zone for them so their lives are protected and preserved. This is what the president, by the way, promised years ago when he said he would draw a red line in Syria and that if Assad started to kill his own people with chemical weapons, he would take him out so they wouldn't die. Since he failed to act, it's 250,000 Syrians who've been murdered by their own government. So I want to stop that slaughter, but I do not want to stop that slaughter at the expense of an American life on the homeland. And so if there was no other solution to the problem, maybe we'd have to do something differently. But there is a solution. And the solution is to let Syrians stay in Syria and fight for their country and create a safe zone for them so that the women and the children are able to be in their own country and safe. And so it's listen, the president tries to make this an easy argument. We're a compassionate nation. How could we ever turn our backs on anyone? That's not what it's about, Mr. President. That's the only piece of the equation. If we let people in who we cannot effectively vet, then we are putting at risk your life and his and his and his. And as President of the United States, my first job is to protect your life and his and his and his. That's my first job. And so I want you to understand, I'm not saying, so we're really clear on this, I'm not saying let the Syrians die. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying let's take American action to keep Syrians in Syria, protect them, create a safe zone in that country for them to be, and then work to solve the problems within Syria so they can get their country back. Bringing them here or Europe or other parts of the Middle East is a temporary solution. Let's come up with a permanent solution that also doesn't put us at risk. See, the president, as always with him, believes there's only one definition of compassion, and that's his. The way there's only one definition of right, and that's his. What I'm saying is there are other ways to do this that I believe can achieve both goals, protect Syrian lives and protect American lives. But let me be clear. If I got to choose between the two, I don't think I have to. But if I did have to choose between the two, I'd be the president of the United States of America. And it's my job to protect American lives first and foremost. So that's what I think. I think it's a good debate, but that's the way I feel about it. And thanks for bringing it up. An important issue. Yes, sir.
Governor, you're probably the only one that's talked about Social Security as much as anyone else, but it started with Lyndon Johnson. He started having all these notes and borrowing against it. He paid the Vietnam War, and every administration thereafter has done this. Not an easy solution, but what would you do? Would you try and get those notes back, paid for, back into Social Security so we can be solvent?
Yeah, well, listen, if I were president for 8 years and made that my only priority, we wouldn't get all the money back that they've stolen. And let's be honest, we're talking about 50 years of theft. 50 years. And this is my argument with Governor Huckabee. He said, well, this isn't people's problem. The government did it. I go, okay. Well, then I agree with you. The government lied to the people and stole from them. Now what? Well, the people shouldn't have to pay for it. Well, who's going to? I mean, this is like my mom when I was growing up, and I'd go shopping with her. And I'd see something I wanted, and I'd say, Mom, can I have that? And she'd say, sure. I'm like, wow, smart. I came shopping with Mom today. No one else wanted to go. I'm going to get something that I want. I'm a smart guy. She goes, yeah, Chris, you can get that. Before you do, though, we got to go home. You got to go in the backyard and pick the money off the money tree and then come back and pay for it. And I'd say, well, wait, we don't have a money tree. She's like, exactly. We don't have a money tree, right? The changes I've talked about making will help to make the program more solvent over the long term and stop the theft that's going on. But will I be able to replace all the money in the notes, the IOUs that have been placed in the trust fund during my time as president? No, I won't. I'll stop adding to it and I'll decrease it, but I won't be able to get rid of all of it. So I don't want to lie to you. Don't worry about it. Elect me and I'll fix it. Next question. You know, I'm not going to do that. This is the biggest fiscal problem we have in the country. And it's getting worse every day. And every day we ignore it, it gets worse, and it gets worse, and it gets worse. And, you know, it's going to threaten our current seniors. 7 to 8 years, not long away. And people who are currently, you know, on Social Security and Medicare, you know, the average life expectancy of a woman now in America is 83 years old. The average life expectancy of a man is 79. We've got a lot of years. Does somebody catch up? What's going on? We heard no. Paul, how old are you, Paul? Paul's 78. Yeah.
One more year.
Remember, Paul, it's only the average. You could do better, and I'm confident you will. But we have to deal with this problem because it's a good problem for us to deal with in this sense. People are living longer. And they're living longer and better lives predominantly because of advances in medical technology and pharmaceuticals. We're living longer, better lives. That's a good thing, but let's get real about it then. And getting real about it means we've got to adjust the programs to adjust to the fact that people are on them for much longer than the programs ever intended them to be on. So I'm not going to fix all the lying and thieving that's happened. I'm not going to add to it, and we hope we'll be able to decrease it through the programs. We'll save $1 trillion over the next 10 years with the plan that I put on our website and that I hope to put in place as president. But we're not going to fix all of it, no. No president's going to be able to fix in 4 or 8 years what it took presidents 50 years to thieve. And then when they thieve another $150 billion for the disability program just 2 weeks ago, makes that 7 to 8 years even shorter. Now, my staff has told me that I can take one more question, which means that I will take 2. And the reason for this is pretty simple, is that I want to prove to them that I'm still the boss. Because people have asked me all the time what it's like to run for president. I want you to understand what it's really like to run for president. What it's like to run for president is this. You are surrounded every day by people that are all younger than you, and they tell you where to go and what to do every minute. When I'm here, it's the one time. It ends when I say it ends. Or when you just decide to get up and walk out, right? So instead of 1, we'll do 2 more. There's a guy back there. I can only see his hand. Yes, there you are.
Governor, this country has huge problems with mass shootings or increased school shootings. I'm an elementary school principal, and at our age level, we are now teaching our students how to react if a gunman enters our school. President Obama doesn't seem, in my opinion, to have an answer to this problem. What do you see as something that you could do as president to help?
Well, I think first off, we need to understand that this mass shootings we've seen, whether they've been in elementary schools or college campuses or movie theaters, are the product almost exclusively of people with serious mental health issues. And so the first thing we need to deal with on this is how we deal with mental health in this society. Mental health and drug and alcohol addiction are still enormously stigmatized in this country. You know, we had this video that Huffington Post put out, I don't know, 3 weeks or so ago, from a town hall meeting here in New Hampshire, where I didn't know they were filming me, but they were filming. And they then went ahead and cut the film and put out this 5 or 6 minute answer I gave on addiction. And it's now gotten 8.3 million views just on the Huffington Post Facebook page. I talked about my mom in the beginning of that answer as an addict. And my mom was addicted to smoking. Right? Now, my mom eventually got diagnosed with lung cancer. And when she did, no one came to me and said she shouldn't be treated. No one came to me and said, well, she's getting what she deserves. Everybody knew smoking's bad for you. Everyone knows this causes lung cancer. She didn't stop. She kept smoking, so she's getting what she deserves, so we're not going to treat her. And, you know, and I was not ashamed to tell people that my mother had cancer. I didn't say, like, sure, Mom, she's sick, but, you know, we talked about it. And people had an outpouring of emotion back. We don't deal with mental health that way. Somehow we think with mental health issues that it reflects upon us as parents, us as siblings, us as spouses, that somehow it's a reflection on us, and we're ashamed to talk about it. And when we don't talk about it, people don't get help. Now, that young man who committed the murders in Sandy Hook, he was obviously, in retrospect, deeply disturbed. And his mom had to know about it. Yet nothing was done. And he turned the gun on her first, and then went off to the school and killed all those children. America needs to start talking about the issues of mental health and addiction. And we need to start providing more treatment to people. We're not going to solve this by taking everybody's gun, because folks who are determined to get guns will get them, even if we decided to go to gun prohibition, which is a ridiculous and anti-constitutional idea. But even if we went to that, it wouldn't solve this problem. The underlying problem is to deal with the mental health issue and to get people assistance. I've said in New Jersey, we need to be able to involuntarily commit people more easy. Doctors are incredibly conflicted now. The rules are so screwy. And they know they've got someone who's speaking out from a violent perspective, who has a history of mental health problems. They can't commit them. We need to commit them not only to protect us, but to protect them against themselves. Because the other thing that we see in most of these mass shootings is that the shooters wind up dead. And most of the time by their own hand. Every once in a while by the police's hand, but most of the time they commit suicide after they've committed murder. We need to deal with this mental health issue as a community, as a country, and addiction, and we need to talk about it. As President of the United States, I will. And in New Jersey, on addiction, we've changed it completely. First-time, nonviolent, non-dealing drug offenders no longer go to prison in New Jersey. They go to mandatory inpatient drug rehabilitation. And our recidivism rate has gone from in the mid-60s to 13% for those people. Fact is, treatment works. Doesn't work for everybody, but it works. And, you know, the same thing with mental health treatment. With the pharmacology we have available to us today and therapy, people with mental illness can be treated. And we need to do it. We need to get these people help. Now, that's a long-term answer. It's not a headline. You know, so the headline is ban this gun or ban this piece of ammunition or lower this, or it'll make you feel good for 10 minutes until you realize that young man in Sandy Hook, he didn't buy that gun. His mother did. His mother bought those guns legally with background checks and all the rest, and he had access to them. And so people saying that's the way to solve the problem aren't thinking. They're feeling. We need to think about this issue. And we need to deal with this issue in a way that provides more treatment for folks. And let me tell you, how are we paying for it in New Jersey? Our corrections budget is going down because we have less people in jail. You know, it's $49,000 per year per person to incarcerate someone in New Jersey. To give them drug treatment, it's $24,000 per person per year. I can treat 2 people for every 1 person I incarcerate. So we need to get smart about this. And we may be to the point where this year we may be able to close a state prison in New Jersey. Imagine that. Try to find any other state in the country where they're actually closing state prisons. So, you know, fact is, that's the way I think we need to deal with it. And we need to deal with it not only through programs, but through the president talking about it. Because when the president talks about it, it becomes less and less taboo every day. People say, well, if the president's talking about it, I guess it's okay to talk about. You need to lead in a lot of different ways as president. And it's not just through spending money and creating programs. It's also through what you decide to talk about standing behind that seal. And I will talk about mental health and drug addiction issues because it's killing families. Not just through the murders and mass shootings you're talking about, but through the everyday deaths that are going on one at a time due to mental health and addiction issues. And last thing is this, for the people in this audience who applauded when I said I'm pro-life, well, if you're going to be pro-life, you better be pro-life for the whole life. It's easy. It is easy to be pro-life for the 9 months they're in the womb. They're perfectly innocent then. They have created no problems for us. That doesn't start till they come out. They come out, life gets a lot more complicated and a lot more difficult. And it's a lot tougher to be pro-life then. But I'm pro-life for the bipolar kid who's considering killing himself. I'm pro-life for the 16-year-old drug-addicted teenager on the floor of the county lockup. I'm pro-life for them too. And it's a lot harder to be pro-life then because those problems are dirty and ugly and nasty, but they are splitting up families and they're causing heartache. And I'll tell you one thing, I was in Hanover, New Hampshire the week after that video came out. And there was a couple standing by the door of this bar where I was going to do the town hall meeting. Got in my car and I was walking. And as I walked towards them, they had this big smile on their faces, both of them. So I was like, okay, they want to say hello. So there was two of them and a dog. And so I walked up and I said hello. And the husband introduced me to his wife. And he said, Governor, we're here because of that video that got put out about addiction that you were talking about. He said it really meant a great deal to us. And we wanted to say thank you for talking about this and talking about it publicly. We really appreciate it. And I said, well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. He said, see, it has special significance to us because we lost our son a week ago today. He was 23 years old, and we lost him to a heroin overdose. And he said, we're up here in Hanover because our daughter goes to Dartmouth, and it's been a really tough week for the family. We wanted to be together this weekend. But we heard you were going to be over here, so we wanted to come over and say thank you because we don't want our son to have died in vain. It's killing families, everybody. That family will never, ever, ever, ever be the same. They'll recover to some extent, we hope, through prayer and the will to support each other. But they'll never be the same. And so we got to be talking about these issues and talk about them because if you're going to be pro-life the whole life. And that's really important. All right, last question. Over to you.
Thank you, Governor. I have another question about the Supreme Court and the trend that is forming with them in actually being a lawmaking branch of government. My particular question is because they ruled on the Miller versus Alabama, where it's unconstitutional to sentence a juvenile, somebody that's under 18, to life in prison. I'm directly affected by this rule. My family, originally from Massachusetts, I have a sister that was murdered by a juvenile who is now immediately eligible for parole. So, as a prosecutor, how would you handle the Supreme Court and keep them from becoming a lawmaking branch? All they are to do is rule on it, like you said earlier.
Yeah. Listen, it's the hardest thing for a president to do because you try to make the best judgments you can up front about who you're appointing, but once you appoint them, they're there for life, and you have no recourse. So the best thing you can do is up front try to pick smart, common sense conservatives who have a track record of respecting their constitutional role, which is to interpret the law, not to make it. But there are no guarantees. And I can't guarantee as I'm sitting here that every person I appoint will do that, because it seems like sometimes they go up there and there must be something in the water. They start off okay, and then all of a sudden, I know what John Roberts was thinking on certain things, right? Who seemed to start off really well, and then all of a sudden, You know, I mean, you remember when President George W. Bush picked John Roberts, it was universally hailed in the conservative community. I mean, they were over the moon that they were going to have this young, conservative Chief Justice who was going to be there for 30 or 40 years. And you didn't hear nary a complaint from anybody in the conservative world about John Roberts. Right? So George W. Bush probably sitting there going, yeah, got that one right. You know, feeling really good. And then all of a sudden, a couple of these decisions come out and you say to yourself, wow, what happened? So I think what I can say to you is the best you can do is to thoroughly vet these people, talk to them really closely, and instead of nominating people who don't have a paper trail, nominate ones who do. Right? Nominate ones who do, so you can see what they've done in public and that they've been willing to put their name on, and not just what they're willing to say to you in the Oval Office when they're trying to get the job, because we've all been there. Right? We've all interviewed for jobs at some point. Let's just say this. We don't not tell the truth, but we put the best face forward or trying to get the job. So it's a natural human thing, but I think that's why I would look to people who have been judges and who have a history, like let's say Justice Alito. Now, he has not been a disappointment to the conservative movement, but I could tell you he was U.S. Attorney in New Jersey before I was. He was a Third Circuit Court of Appeals judge. He had a long history, over a decade in the Third Circuit Court of Appeals before he went to the United States Supreme Court. And he was always ruling consistently in a conservative way that respected the lawmaking authority of the legislature and the interpretation prerogative of the courts. So he's turned out to be a real success that President Bush put on there. But I think you got to go more towards that than you would the other direction. But it is, you know, one of those things that will make executives shake their heads. You know, Eisenhower, you know, thought he was getting this conservative guy from New Jersey. His chief of staff assured him that this was a conservative guy from New Jersey to put on the Supreme Court. His name was Bill Brennan. Eisenhower said the single biggest mistake he made, other than having appointed Earl Warren, right? So, you know, these things happen to even well-intentioned folks, but I think the best you can do is just grind in and try to really get at people with a paper trail as a history. And you're gonna have it'll make it a tougher confirmation because they have a history, but you gotta be willing to fight for it. And that's what I would be willing to do and have done as governor of New Jersey too. All right, so now, since they told me I could only have one, I took two. I probably shouldn't press my luck any further, but I wanna say a few things to all of you before I go. First thing is to say thank you. It is fabulous as a candidate to campaign here because you all care so much about this process, and you're here on a Saturday afternoon when you could be anywhere. On a Saturday afternoon after a hard week of work, you're here. And I can't tell you not only how great that is for our country, but I want to personalize it for you, how great it is for me that you walk into a place like this and so many people care and have such great questions and have really thought things through, and whether we agree or we disagree on any particular topic. You could see, I called on people today who agree with me on some things, who disagree with me on some things. Here's what I want to make sure always happens, that we treat those people who agree and disagree with us both with respect, because they showed up and they're involved and they're part of the process and they got to be treated with respect. So that's why when this young man was asking about Syrian refugees, man, it's an important question. And he may have a different point of view than me, and I respect him for that. And I respect him for raising his hand, knowing it was a different point of view than I have, and saying, I'm going to ask him anyway. Man, that's the kind of citizens we need in this country, who are willing to stand up and speak for what they believe and participate in this process. That's what makes New Hampshire special. What makes New Hampshire special is you've got people like this who are willing to come dive into this thing and do what they believe is right for their country. And so thank you for coming and doing that. Second, I want you to understand that I understand the way New Hampshire works. I'm starting to get it. Don, a side text, laughing at me, but I'm starting to get it. An early town hall meeting I had, third or fourth town hall meeting I had, at the end of the town hall meeting, a gentleman came up to me, and he said to me, Governor, thanks for coming. Listen to everything you had to say. I agree with everything you had to say. And I said, great. And he goes, and I'm not voting for you. I said, wait, you agree with everything I say you're not voting for me? He goes, nope, not voting for you. I said, can I ask why not? He said, sure. He said, I'm not voting for you because you forgot something. And since you forgot it, he said, I'm not voting for you. I said, well, can you tell me what I forgot? And he said, nope. He said, you'll figure it out. Don't worry. It's early. You'll figure it out. And I said, so no, that's not fair. I mean, come on. You got to at least tell me what I forgot. And he said, all right, I'll tell you. He said, you never asked for the vote. He said, I sat here for 2 hours. I listened to all your speech. I listened to all the answers to the questions. I was incredibly impressed. And I said, getting to the end of it, and I'm thinking to myself, he's going to look at me. He's going to ask me for the vote. And that's great because I agree with the guy. I'm going to vote for him. He said, you never asked. So you're not getting the vote. So I looked at him and I said, can I have your vote? He said, too late. And I said to him, well, wait a second. Too late? And he said, I'll come back to another one later. And if you learn your lesson, he said, I'll reconsider. And I said, well, thank you, sir. And he walked away. He got about 4 steps away. He turned back around and he goes, and by the way, son, that's the way we do things in New Hampshire. Right? So people call me lots of things and have called me lots of things over time. Dumb's not one of them. So I end by asking for your vote. I'm asking, every one of you. Every one of you in here, I'm asking you for your vote. You and you and you and you and you, all of you. I'm asking the guy with the camera, I'm asking him for his vote too. He's just smiling behind the camera and keeps doing his job, but I'm asking him also. But because I'm from New Jersey, I'm going to raise the ante. I don't just want your vote. I want your trust and your confidence too. See, because if I get your vote, I'll get to the White House, and that'll be a great thing. And I'll be excited to have the chance to do this job. But if I don't have your trust and your confidence, I can't be a successful president. See, if I just get there without your trust and confidence, and something goes wrong, you'll all be sitting here second-guessing yourself. Oh, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have. Yeah, maybe it wasn't really all that. Okay, well, let's make sure this guy goes down. We got to get him out of there. Let's move on. But if I have your trust and your confidence in addition to your vote, you're going to help to make me successful. Because it's what I said at the beginning. This is not about one person. This is about a communion among us to stand up for the things that America's always stood up for. It's a communion among us. A leader by himself or herself cannot do this. They can't. One person will not make America greater. One person can help to lead a movement that will make America greater. But it won't happen without you. And you won't follow me if I don't have your trust and confidence. I had a great political science professor one time who told me in college, remember something, Chris, a leader without followers is just a guy out for a walk. It's really good. He was great. He had 2 great phrases for politics that he gave me. May he rest in peace. This is an old Southern gentleman who got educated at the University of Virginia and was the head of the political science department at the University of Delaware, where I was fortunate enough to go to college and have him be my advisor, my academic advisor, and a mentor. And he, to the point where 6 months before his death, he came to New Jersey in 2009 and made phone bank calls for me in my first campaign for governor. Came up to New Jersey, now with this deep Southern accent. You can only imagine how those GOTV calls went. Really great. But he was great to be there. He gave me 2 great phrases, right? That first one, leader without followers, just as a guy out for a walk. And the second one was, when your adversary's in the midst of committing suicide, there's no reason to commit murder. The result's the same. Another really good political bit of advice, right? Because we're all like pushing, like I'll push the guy over, I'll fight, I'll do. If he's in the process of committing suicide, let nature take its course, right? What he taught me when he said a leader without followers, just a guy out for a walk, is that you have to not only ask for the vote, but ask for the trust and the confidence of the people. Because then we'll be together. That's why I use the word communion. That's what we need to establish again in this country, a communion of interests, a communion of hope, a communion of fighting, a communion of belief in the fact that those principles, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, are where it all starts. And if it doesn't start there, we're not going to get to a good point. I'll also tell you, in addition to asking for your vote and your trust and your confidence, is I want to be president of the United States. I'm not doing this to get a book deal. I'm not doing this to get a talk show on Fox News. I want to be president. And I'm not going to be one of those guys, like I said in response to that guy's question, who's going to be sitting around moaning and complaining about this process, okay? Oh, I wish it were better. I wish it were different. I thought it was going to be easier. I thought it would be more joyful. I thought it was going to be so many other things, but it's not. No, I'm so oppressed and put down. I'm trying to get through as best I can. Talk to me. Listen to me. No. I am amongst the luckiest people in the world. I'm getting to a chance, a legitimate chance, to run for president of the greatest country the world has ever known. Never going to hear me complain once, not once. My great-grandfather and great-grandmother came to this country on the boat from Sicily when my great-grandmother was 9 months pregnant with my grandfather. My great-grandfather was a mason. He was coming to New York and New Jersey because they were building things. He came with $7 in his pocket. And when their ticket got called to come to America, my great-grandmother was 9 months pregnant. When she made the decision to get on that boat, she knew she was going to give birth on the boat. I can guarantee everybody this was not like luxury, boat on the way over here, okay? I cannot imagine she made that judgment. She wasn't going to let her husband go by himself. She wanted to go to America, and she got on there. And my grandfather, my mother's dad, was born on that boat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And my mother used to tease him about it all the time. She'd say, "You're nothing. You're not American. You're not Italian. You're nothing. You were born in the middle of the ocean." And it was the only time I can ever remember as a young kid my grandfather getting visibly angry in front of me. He would get all red in the face and he would yell at my mother. He'd say, "Don't you say that in front of my grandson. I'm an American. They made me an American when I got to Ellis Island. I'm an American. Don't you say that in front of my grandson." He was so proud that his mother and father had done it the right way. So that when they arrived at Ellis Island and he is an infant, they made him an American citizen. And he was a Mason too, like his father. The grandson of the Mason, born in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean to a father with $7 in his pocket, is getting to run for president of the United States. I better never complain about anything. Only in this country could this happen. And so when I tell you I want to be your president, I mean it from the bottom of my heart. I want this job. I want to be able to do it well. I want to be able to do it to make the country a better place. I want to be able to do it to make you proud. And you'll never hear me complain, ever. And man, if I haven't complained as governor of New Jersey, you're certainly not going to hear me complain about president of the United States, right? So I'm ready. There's some people in this room who came to me 4 years ago and told me I should run for president. And I told them no, because I felt in my heart I wasn't ready. And when I said I wasn't running, that's what I said. I said, I'm not running because I'm not ready. My political advisor said, "Oh, God, don't say that. They'll have that tape forever. You saying I'm not ready to be president." I said, well, I wasn't. And the only thing worse than running for president and losing is running for president and winning when you're not ready. Right? And we've seen it. So here's the thing. We've seen it. So here's the thing. I'm tested, and I'm ready, and I want to do the job. And here's the great thing about New Hampshire. I will guarantee you all something. I win the New Hampshire primary on February 9th. You are looking at the 45th president of the United States. Thank you all for coming.